You fancy yourselves combatants? I have seen trials unmatched. Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, children's playthings. Tekken, Soul Calibur, dead or alive. Like brushing the wool of a newborn lamb. Tell me, brave warriors, have you ever tried to play a fighting game with this abomination? Biofreaks, Deadly Arts, Fighter's Destiny, Dark Rift, War Gods. Merely a drop of blood before the real battle. An appetizer. You know not struggle until you have failed to beat a fighting game on easy, shaming your bloodline for generations to come. My honor is false. I am lost. But you, Moya Kurtacek, you may yet prevail. Your virgin flesh is supple. Your spirit has not yet been broken, but it will. Oh yes, it will. By 1997, we had fighting games like Tekken 2 on PlayStation and Virtua Fighter 2 on the Saturn, both landmark titles in the genre, and both exclusive to their release platforms. The N64, on the other hand, was kind of an odd duck. Giants in the genre like Namco and Capcom really weren't supporting the Big N's shiny new console. Mostly due to storage limitations of the cartridge format. By the end of 1996, the 64's first year on the market, only 2 fighting games were released: Mortal Kombat Trilogy and Killer Instinct Gold. 1997 saw the release of the first batch of 3D brawlers with Dark Rift, which was originally developed as a Sega Saturn title, and War Gods, which was a multi-platform release developed by Midway. Both received a tepid response from reviewers at the time. Then along comes gaming's first superstars, Atari. Well, Atari Games, to be exact. It's an important distinction with a ton of history behind it that I can't exactly go into right now, but basically, Atari Games was the arcade division of Atari, and they were the only profitable part of the company during the video game crash of the early 80s. Atari died at home, but survived in the arcade. Atari Games is responsible for legendary arcade hits like Paperboy, Gauntlet, Super Sprint, 720, Road Blasters, Tubin, Hard Drivin', Clax, Pit Fighter, and Rampart. By the mid-1990s, they were riding pretty high with releases like Primal Rage, Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey, and San Francisco Rush. Mace: The Dark Age hit arcades in March 1997, the same month as Tekken 3. Now, you might think, damn, that's a rough go. Coming out the same month as Tekken 3, one of the most legendary fighting games of all time. But you gotta remember that in early 1997, 3D fighting games were still, well, not in their infancy, but definitely still in diapers. Mace had room to breathe, and people were not as picky as they are today. Really, any new fighter was given a chance, and Mace certainly looked like a heavy hitter. For early 1997, this is a pretty game. I really do think it holds up against Tekken 3 in this department. Atari Games decided to use 3DFX Voodoo graphics cards in their arcade cabs as a cost-saving measure. San Francisco Rush had used the same setup, and you can kind of feel that that game shares some of the same DNA as Mace. For the uninitiated, Voodoo cards were the first commercially available 3D graphics cards released for home PCs. First launched in 1996, they were cutting-edge tech for the home market and helped bolster the 3D revolution by unlocking the true potential of games like Quake, Descent, and Carmageddon. So basically, Mace looks like it's running on a high-end home computer that would have cost at least $2,000 or $4,000 in 2025's crazy Monopoly money. Models are sharp, texture work is a little soft here and there, but overall, very well crafted. Backgrounds are dithered, but acceptable. That is to say, it looks better than your average fighting game for early 1997. Also of note is the motion capture, performed by members of the Society for Creative Anachronism. Basically, the cream of the crop when it comes to medieval recreationists. If you're a real nerd, you know that our boy Lord British is a very famous member. Where the game really shines is the art design. This might be the most metal fighting game I've ever played. Imagine a medieval Mortal Kombat with heavy metal magazine vibes and a healthy dose of S&M for good measure. I mean, just look at the game's cover boy, edgelord Demos. Yes, daddy. The mostly metal-inspired soundtrack was composed by Richard Marriott, who had quite a cultured resume of operas, musical theater, dance, and silent film. His work for Atari Games seems like an anomaly. Richard, if you're watching this, I have had this song stuck in my head for 28 years. It haunts me. Every time a stranger introduces themselves, I am tormented by this song. Did you write this affront to God?
What's your name? Start with a C. Start with a G. Start with a Z. Nothing nasty now. What's your name? Spell it. H-I-J-K-L-M-N-O-B. That's how you spell it. What's your name? That's your name.
When they get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide. Where I stop, turn and I go for the ride till I get to the bottom, and I see you again, see you again. Hey! Do you, don't you? Want me to love you?
Besides Richard's contributions, the ambience of Maze consists of lots of shouting and various armaments clanging together. But there is one more standout audio feature of Mace: the announcer.
Lord Demos versus Mordo's Call. Round 1, fight.
This guy goes so hard. He sounds like Tim Curry from the movie Legend and completely hams up the performance.
Lord Demos win.
When I was streaming Mace to capture the footage for this video, a viewer pointed out how the announcer sounds a lot like our boy, Lord Demos.
Lord Demos is having a bad time. Lord Demos just wanted to hang out with friends. Lord Demos' friends lied to Lord Demos. They said tournament would be fun.
Which, if you're playing as Lord Demos, makes him sound like he's referring to himself in the third person, like Duffman.
Duffman can't breathe. Oh no.
If you've played a 3D arcade fighter, Jesus Christ, oh my God, that scared the out of me. If you've played a 3D arcade fighter from the mid-90s, then you know what to expect here. Style over substance. You will not find a combat system like Virtual Fighter 2 here, nor will you find the buttery smooth controls of Soul Calibur. The gameplay of Mace most resembles other 3D efforts from contemporaries like Midway. Controls are dead simple, and really, that's what you want in an arcade fighter. There's quick, strong attacks, a kick, an evade button, which only allows you to sidestep away from the camera. You need to hold down and evade to sidestep toward the camera. You can also press forward or back with the evade button to create breathing room or rush your opponent. Each fighter has some basic combos, some specials, and specials that can be worked into combos. There's also counterattacks that I was never able to land, but the computer certainly had no problems with them. And then there's the fatalities, which, let's be honest, are really what we all came for. In classic Mortal Kombat fashion, these range from brutal to downright silly. Since I'm a Lord Demos stan, I got to see a lot of this. Mace the Dark Age was released on the Nintendo 64 in September of 1997. There was a PlayStation port in development, but it was canceled, likely due to the console not being powerful enough to run an acceptable facsimile of voodoo-powered coin-op arcade hardware. However, War Gods did get a PlayStation port, so who knows if that's really the case. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Mace on the N64 does not look as good as the arcade. We all knew that was coming. The textures and the sound are compressed, of course, but going by the standards of the home console market in early 1997, Mace looks amazing. My first playthrough for this video was on a real Nintendo 64 and a real Mace cartridge, hooked up to a RetroTink 5X through composite video, which was the standard at the time. But it's pretty unfair to compare that to what is essentially a contemporary high-end PC. So let's give the N64 a fighting chance by eliminating the ancient hardware and booting up Mace in the Project 64 emulator. I haven't really done anything fancy here, just basic settings. Sure, the textures are still blurry, but that was a feature, not a bug, of the Nintendo 64. Doesn't this look like a Dreamcast game to you? It looks really good. Some people may not consider this pure or not how the game was meant to be played, but this is what a pure N64 capture looks like on a modern computer, and that's just unacceptable. Besides the visual differences, the N64 port of Mace added new colors for each character's costume, as well as a couple secret characters that are, let's just say, out of their element.
Mojo versus Namura.
In a strange twist, I actually had an easier time with the arcade version, and I'm pretty sure that's because the N64 version reads your inputs. That means that the computer opponents are able to read your movements quicker than any human opponent ever could. This is a common issue with fighting games from this era, and was used as a simple way to inflate the value of otherwise short games. The rental market at the time also had influence here because Blockbuster wanted to make sure you had to rent a game multiple times in order to complete it. For a moment, I had naively thought that my skill had improved, but it became obvious that the arcade version of Mace was not reading my inputs. Like, I'm no master at fighting games, but I wasn't even able to complete this game on the default setting of medium. And completing it on easy also would have been impossible if it weren't for cheats. Sorry. While being a commercial success, Mace received, frankly, mediocre scores across the board. Most reviewers agreed that, while it looked fantastic, the gameplay was lacking. The arcade version of Mace wasn't a blockbuster, so it stands to reason that the N64 version isn't exactly awe-inspiring. It is, however, a pretty solid fighting game with excellent polygonal graphics. I love the level of difficulty, even on easy. The toughest gamers will have a hard time beating Mace their first few games. The practice mode, a welcome new feature, will help you overcome this challenge. Better than the arcade. Don't be fooled by screenshots. This game looks good standing still, but not in motion. The frame rate stinks. I know the N64 can do better in that department. Look at Dark Rift. But in the gameplay department, Mace beats out anything on the N64, so far. It takes technique to perfect Mace, not just blind button tapping. Since Mace's style is flashy, it needs a few flashy features, like super combos. Final note, the AI is way too cheap. By order of default, Mace: The Dark Age is the best fighting game on the N64. Peering past the graphics, things start to go downhill fast in Mace. Game control is the most important piece of the puzzle with fighting games, and Mace just doesn't deliver the goods the way it should. 3 years ago, Mace would have been a revolutionary game, but today it is merely average. When I first saw Mace, I was impressed, but with further play, my impression changed. The frame rate was sluggish a lot of the time, and the moves just didn't impress me all that much, save the cool fatalities. Mace did feature some nice graphics effects, like the transparent foreground so it wouldn't get in the way of fighting. Other good points include the funny, but useful practice mode, and arenas, but that's just not enough. Why did I bother to cover Mace, a relatively obscure N64 game, as my first fighting game for this channel? Well, as usual, nostalgia got the better of me. I loved this game when it came out. The N64 was starved for fighting games, a genre that I had developed a love for on the Sega Genesis and the PlayStation. Dark Rift was pretty bad, and War Gods, though inspired, just felt like a Mortal Kombat clone. To me, Mace always stood out amongst the small pool of brawlers on Nintendo's next-gen powerhouse. Pardon my French, but Mace was bitchin'. It looked cutting edge. It was violent. It sounded angry. And even though it's not saying much, it was the best 3D fighting game on the N64 at the time. And I felt like it was absolutely made for 15-year-old me. So remember, this Christmas, tell your folks, buy me Mace the Dark Age or go to hell! Love you, bye!